Get your hands where I can see them! Now! The officer's voice cracked through the quiet morning like thunder over calm water. You don't belong here! Boy, step away from that car before I make you regret it! Those words, filled with arrogance and hate, echoed across the driveway of a $3.5 million home in one of California's richest suburbs. They weren't shouted at a criminal or a trespasser. They were aimed at Marcus Reynolds, a 50-year-old black man, dressed in a tailored Navy suit, standing by his own Rolls-Royce. What happened next would shake the entire nation. Before we begin, where are you watching from? Drop your city below. Hit subscribe if you believe in fairness, and like so more people hear this story. Now, let's begin. It was a crisp morning in Willow Ridge, a quiet, picture-perfect suburb just outside San Francisco. The kind of place where every lawn looked like it had been measured with a ruler, where the mailboxes gleamed brighter than the morning sun, and where one simple fact remained unspoken. Outsiders were never welcome. Marcus Reynolds adjusted the sleeve of his suit and glanced at his watch. It was 9:45 a.m. He had 25 minutes before his meeting with Director Elena Vargas at the FBI field office. As Assistant Director of the Civil Rights Division, Marcus had spent decades fighting for justice, dismantling corruption, and protecting citizens from discrimination. Yet here he stood, in his own driveway, about to face the same prejudice he'd dedicated his life to ending. From the upstairs window, his 10-year-old daughter, Zoe, watched her father with pride. She loved mornings like this, seeing him calm, composed, and focused before work. But the peace shattered when a white patrol car turned sharply into the cul-de-sac. Officer Ryan Caldwell stepped out, his posture stiff, his hand already near his holster. Marcus turned calmly, expecting perhaps a wave or a routine question. Instead, the officer's eyes narrowed. Sir, I received a report of a suspicious male on this property. I'm going to need you to step away from that vehicle. Marcus's brow furrowed slightly. This is my home. Officer, is there a problem? Caldwell's lips twisted into a smirk. Your home? You expect me to believe that? Don't play smart. Let's see some ID. His tone wasn't curious. It was accusatory, laced with disdain. Behind a nearby hedge, a phone camera quietly went live. Sophia Ramirez, a 38-year-old immigrant and single mother who lived 2 houses down, had seen the patrol car stop. Her instincts told her something was wrong. Within seconds, her live stream was broadcasting across social media, 5,000 viewers and climbing. I'm sorry, officer, Marcus said evenly, keeping his voice calm. But I'd appreciate it if you didn't raise your tone in front of my daughter. Caldwell took a step closer, the morning sun reflecting off his badge. Don't tell me how to do my job. You think dressing up makes you untouchable? You're lucky I didn't draw on you the moment I saw you hovering around that car. Marcus drew a breath, steady and deliberate. That car is mine. The deed to this property. 2. My name is Marcus Reynolds. But Caldwell didn't care about names. He cared about power. Years of bitterness had hardened him. A bitter divorce, mounting debt, and the whispering influence of Detective Harlan Kane, a man who thrived on using others as pawns. To Caldwell, Marcus wasn't a homeowner. He was an opportunity to vent every ounce of resentment he'd built up inside. Show me ID, Caldwell barked again, now pulling his gloves tighter. Marcus reached into his inside pocket, slowly and deliberately, pulling out his wallet. Caldwell snatched it aggressively, flipping through without care. He laughed under his breath. A federal credit card? Nice fake. Rolex, too, huh? You people love playing make-believe. The insult hung heavy in the air. Marcus said nothing. Years of field experience had taught him that silence could be more powerful than words. But silence also had a cost. Behind the lens of Sophia's phone, comments began flooding in, some outraged, others skeptical. "Why is he so calm?" one viewer wrote. "Because he's been here before." Another replied, "Upstairs." Zoe's small fingers trembled as she dialed her mother. "Mom," she whispered, "the police are yelling at Daddy." Aisha Reynolds, a community activist and researcher, froze mid-speech at her nonprofit office. Her voice caught in her throat. "Stay upstairs, baby, don't move." She grabbed her keys and ran for the door, back in the driveway. The tension grew. Caldwell, now circling Marcus like a predator testing its prey, mocked his calmness. "So, you're saying this is your property, huh? Funny, because the call came from your HOA coordinator herself." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Susan Whitaker?" he asked, already knowing the answer. Caldwell grinned. "That's right. Said there was a man loitering near a luxury vehicle, matching your description." Marcus didn't respond. He'd heard of Whitaker's so-called neighborhood standards program, a polite term for exclusion. But what Caldwell didn't know was that Marcus was already investigating corruption in Willow Ridge, including Whitaker's involvement with Detective Kane. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was the trap he'd been expecting. Caldwell suddenly pushed Marcus's shoulder. "Hands on the car." "Excuse me?" "You heard me. Hands on the car." "Officer, I've done nothing wrong." "Do it! Now!" The shout startled even the birds overhead. Sophia's camera shook as she gasped, whispering, "Oh my God! He's arresting him!" Marcus hesitated, not out of fear, but disbelief. His instincts as an agent told him to de-escalate, but his heart ached knowing Zoe was watching. "You're making a mistake," Marcus said quietly. "Yeah, the only mistake here," Caldwell sneered, "is thinking you belong in this neighborhood." In one rough motion, Caldwell spun Marcus around, slamming his hands against the gleaming hood of the Rolls-Royce. The reflection in the polished metal showed a calm, disciplined man enduring the humiliation he'd fought his whole life to prevent others from facing. As the cuffs locked, the timer on Marcus's phone lit up. 15 minutes until the call. He glanced toward the house, where Zoe's frightened eyes met his. For her sake. He forced a reassuring smile. Caldwell mistook it for defiance. "Oh, you think this is funny?" he growled. "We'll see how funny it is when you're sitting in the back of my car." Sophia's live stream crossed 10,000 viewers. People began tagging news outlets, civil rights pages, and local reporters. The story was spreading like wildfire. But Marcus wasn't panicking. He was waiting, because deep down, he knew something Caldwell didn't. The truth was about to arrive in a way that no one in Willow Ridge would ever forget. The steel of the handcuffs bit into Marcus's wrists, but his composure didn't waver. Years of FBI interrogations had taught him that anger feeds the oppressor, while calm disarms them. Officer Ryan Caldwell circled him like a vulture, eyes glinting with satisfaction, convinced he'd caught a criminal. "You think standing here in a suit makes you somebody?" he sneered. "You people always find new ways to play victim." The words landed heavy, not just because of their venom, but because Marcus could feel the eyes of his neighbors watching. Curtains twitched, doors cracked open, some recorded, others whispered, but no one intervened. "Officer," Marcus said quietly, "you're making a serious mistake. I'm asking you one last time to remove these cuffs." Caldwell laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Oh, we got ourselves a lawyer now, huh? You think name-dropping your so-called job is going to get you off?" He pulled Marcus's wallet back out, flicking through it again. "Federal Bureau of Investigation." He read mockingly. "Sure you are. Probably printed this online. You know how many fake IDs we find every week?" His voice carried over the driveway, loud enough for the growing crowd to hear, from the sidewalk. Sofia Ramirez's phone continued streaming live. "This is still happening," she whispered into the mic. He told him it's his house. He showed ID, and that officer just laughed. Her stream hit 18,000 viewers. The comments were exploding, some crying racism, others demanding proof. "Where's the badge number?" one wrote. Sophia zoomed in on Caldwell's chest. 5289, she said softly. "Remember that number?" Caldwell turned sharply toward her. "Hey, turn that off!" Sophia didn't flinch. "This is America," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "We have the right to document public officials." He glared, but she didn't stop. That small act of defiance would soon change everything. Marcus lifted his head slightly, eyes meeting hers. There was gratitude in his look, silent but clear. Behind his calm exterior, a plan was unfolding. He'd already predicted something like this could happen. Operation Reflection wasn't just about paperwork and statistics. It was about exposure. And now, the exposure had begun. "You're trespassing on private property," Caldwell barked again, stepping closer. "Your own words prove it. You said this is your house? Then why was the call made?" Marcus took a slow breath. "Maybe you should ask who made that call." Caldwell smirked. "Oh, I know exactly who did. Susan Whitaker, HOA coordinator. She said she saw someone who didn't belong here walking near the property, and you took her word for it without checking a deed or registry? I don't need to check when something looks wrong." The officer's words cut through the morning air like a confession. It wasn't about evidence. It was about perception, about skin color, about bias wrapped in the illusion of duty. From the corner of his eye, Marcus saw another patrol car approaching. Officers Laura Benson and Miguel Torres stepped out. Benson was young, professional-looking, but cautious. Torres, older and heavier, walked with the weariness of a man who'd seen too much to care anymore. "What's going on? Ryan?" Benson asked, scanning the scene. "Got a trespasser claiming he owns the place," Caldwell replied. "Fake FBI badge and all." Marcus turned his head slightly. "It's not fake. Call Director Elena Vargas at Quantico. She'll confirm it." Caldwell's jaw tightened. "You don't get to throw names around to scare people. This isn't Washington." Torres frowned, studying Marcus's demeanor. Something about him didn't match a criminal. "Ryan," he said quietly, "let's just check the system." "No," Caldwell snapped. "We're not wasting time on that. We got the call. We follow through." Marcus looked at Torres. "Sergeant, please, check the property record. It's public. 311 Oakwood Lane. The title's under Marcus D. Reynolds." But Caldwell grabbed Marcus by the shoulder. "Don't talk to my team. You talk to me." Benson's eyes darted between them. "Ryan, maybe he's telling the truth." "Don't be naive," Caldwell shot back. "This is how they play it." Benson froze, caught between duty and discomfort. "This doesn't feel right," she murmured. Caldwell ignored her. "You said your name's Reynolds, huh? So why didn't you answer the door when Susan came by last week?" Marcus's voice remained steady. "Because I was in Washington, testifying before the Senate Judiciary Committee. Maybe you saw it on television. Operation Reflection hearings." Caldwell scoffed. "Yeah, sure. You expect me to believe you're some big-shot FBI agent living in a neighborhood like this?" "You mean a black man," Marcus said quietly. Caldwell's smirk faltered. "What did you just say?" "You said neighborhood like this. But what you meant was a man like me." For a split second, silence filled the air. Caldwell's hand twitched near his weapon. The tension was electric. Sophia's voice broke through the live stream. "He's unarmed," she whispered. "He's not resisting. Why is the officer reaching for his gun?" Upstairs, Zoe's small face appeared again in the window, her hands pressed against the glass, trembling. She whispered a prayer her father couldn't hear. In that same moment, Marcus's phone began to buzz in his pocket. Another call from Director Vargas. He ignored it again, eyes still locked on Caldwell. It wasn't time yet. "Step back!" Caldwell shouted, pulling his gun halfway from its holster. Benson gasped. "Ryan, stop! He's cuffed!" "He's got something planned," Caldwell barked. "You see that look? He's mocking me." "He's not mocking you," Torres said firmly. "He's trying to keep this peaceful." Caldwell turned on him. "Don't tell me how to do my job." The veins in his neck bulged. This wasn't about law enforcement anymore. It was about ego, about a man spiraling from authority into chaos. Susan Whitaker appeared at the edge of the crowd, arms crossed, her pearl earrings glinting. "Officer Caldwell," she called out. "I told you this would happen. We can't let just anyone claim property here. It's bad for the image of the neighborhood." Marcus turned his head slightly. "You mean bad for property values?" She smiled coldly. "Exactly." Benson's jaw tightened. Even she couldn't hide her disgust. Sophia captured every word, her phone shaking from adrenaline. The live stream's viewer count surged past 18,000. Hashtags were forming. Willow Ridge Incident. Justice for Marcus. "Ma'am," Torres said, "this isn't your concern." "Oh, it absolutely is," Whitaker replied. "We have to maintain standards. This community was built on reputation." Marcus's calm finally cracked. "Reputation built on exclusion," he said. Caldwell shoved him back against the car again. "Enough! You keep your mouth shut until I say you can talk." The cold metal pressed harder against Marcus's wrists. The sun glared off the Rolls-Royce, its surface reflecting a man caught between humiliation and purpose. The viewers kept rising. 20,000, 22,000, 25,000. Sophia's heart pounded. She whispered into her mic, "This isn't just a traffic stop. This is something bigger." And she was right, because in exactly 15 minutes, the quiet suburb of Willow Ridge would be surrounded by black SUVs bearing the insignia of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. But for now, all that mattered was the growing tension, the disbelief in Torres's eyes, the fear in Benson's, and the hatred burning in Caldwell's. Marcus took a slow breath, whispering to himself, "Almost time." Then, softly, he said the words that froze Caldwell in place. "Badge number 5, 2, 8, 9. You should have been more careful who you served under." Caldwell's eyes widened. "What did you just say?" Marcus looked him in the eye. "I know everything about you." For the first time. The officer's confidence wavered, and as he stepped back, trembling slightly, Sophia's live stream hit 30,000 viewers. The world was watching, and justice was quietly making its way down Oakwood Lane. The neighborhood had never been so quiet. Even the wind seemed to pause as the tension on Oakwood Lane reached its breaking point. Officer Caldwell's grip tightened on his holster, sweat forming at his temple. Though the morning air was cool, his mind raced. How could this man know his badge number, his secrets, his ties to Detective Harlan Kane? Marcus stood motionless, hands still cuffed behind his back, his calmness infuriating to a man used to control. From across the street, Sofia Ramirez whispered to her phone. He just said the officer's badge number before the officer even gave it. How would he know that? Her live stream crossed 45,000 viewers, spreading like wildfire across social media platforms. News notifications began pinging on phones throughout the neighborhood. For Marcus, the unfolding chaos wasn't an accident. It was a plan years in the making. He had seen too many of these encounters end in tragedy. This time, he was ready. "You want to play games with me, Reynolds?" Caldwell barked, voice shaking now more from fear than power. "Who told you about me? You been digging around in police files or something?" Marcus's gaze was unwavering. "You did that yourself, officer. Every complaint, every report, every person you humiliated. It all left a trail." Caldwell's face flushed red. "You don't know a damn thing about me." I know about the 19 complaints, Marcus replied evenly. I know 92% of them involve people of color. I know that Detective Harlan Kane has been protecting you for years because you helped him bury evidence from 2 drug raids gone wrong. Caldwell's mouth went dry. Benson and Torres turned sharply toward him. What is he talking about? Benson asked, alarm creeping into her tone. Caldwell snapped. Don't listen to him. He's lying. But Torres's expression said otherwise. He'd worked long enough to recognize fear, and Caldwell's face was full of it. Marcus lowered his voice, not for intimidation, but precision. Badge number 5, 2, 8, 9, the night of March 12th. You stopped a teenager on the corner of Maple and Glen. You planted evidence after realizing your partner's body cam was dead. The report disappeared 2 days later. Thanks to Kane. Caldwell lunged forward, his voice cracking. Shut up! You don't know what you're talking about. Marcus didn't flinch. I know exactly what I'm talking about. Sophia zoomed in, capturing every word, her audience flooding the chat with outrage. This man is FBI, one commenter wrote. How is he still cuffed? This cop's finished, another added, inside the house. Zoe couldn't look away. She whispered to herself, Please, Daddy, let them see who you are. From the corner of the street, news vans began arriving. The first reporter, Dana Nguyen from Channel 9, stepped out with a cameraman. She'd been following Sophia's feed since it hit 20,000 viewers. She didn't need a press release to know a national story when she saw one. We're live in Willow Ridge, she whispered into her mic, where a black man has just been detained in his own driveway. Viewers, this is developing fast. Caldwell turned toward the sound of the news van doors slamming shut and cursed under his breath. You think this little show is going to save you? He hissed. Marcus looked him dead in the eye. No, it's going to save you. The words made Caldwell blink in confusion before he could respond. A low rumble echoed down the street. Engines, synchronized, powerful, unmistakably federal. Black SUVs, polished and imposing, rolled through the neighborhood like a slow-moving storm. Their tinted windows mirrored the stunned faces of onlookers. Benson took a step back. Ryan, those are bureau vehicles. Caldwell's heart pounded. No, that can't be. Marcus turned slightly, the corner of his mouth lifting. You should have listened when I said I work for the FBI. One by one. The SUVs stopped in formation. Doors opened, and agents stepped out, dressed in dark suits with earpieces glinting under the sun. Leading them was Director Elena Vargas, calm, deliberate, and commanding. Her reputation for fairness matched only by her intolerance for injustice. Release him, she ordered before anyone else could speak. Caldwell hesitated, looking like a man watching his career burn before his eyes. Ma'am, he was trespassing. On his own property? Vargas cut him off sharply. Officer Caldwell, you've just unlawfully detained my assistant director. The crowd gasped. Benson's jaw dropped. Assistant director? She repeated softly. Torres muttered a curse under his breath. Vargas walked straight up to Marcus, her tone shifting from authority to empathy. Marcus, are you all right? I'm fine. Director, Marcus said, voice even. Right on schedule? Caldwell's confusion deepened. Schedule? What the hell is going on? Vargas turned to face him. What's going on, officer? Is that you just became part of an ongoing federal investigation, one that's been in motion for nearly 2 years. Operation Reflection. Does that ring a bell? Caldwell stammered. Operation what? It's an internal civil rights probe into 52 police departments across the country. Vargas said coldly. Yours is one of them. And you, Officer Caldwell, are the reason this department ranked in the 95th percentile for racial bias complaints. Caldwell's face drained of color. You You set me up. No, Marcus corrected calmly. You set yourself up. I just made sure the world was watching when you did it. The live stream, now exceeding 70,000 viewers, captured everything, the shock on Caldwell's face, the FBI agent stepping between him and Marcus, and Director Vargas addressing the crowd. For the record, she said clearly, this man is Marcus Reynolds, Assistant Director of the Civil Rights Division, and a federal agent with 25 years of service. He was assaulted, restrained, and humiliated on his own property because of racial bias and unlawful profiling. The crowd erupted, some gasping, others shouting in disbelief. Sophia turned her phone toward the SUVs, her voice trembling. It's true. The FBI just confirmed it. Upstairs. Zoe burst into tears, clutching her mother's hand as Aisha arrived, out of breath. They know now, Aisha whispered, kneeling beside her. They finally know. Vargas turned back to Caldwell, her voice firm but calm. You've had 19 complaints, Officer Caldwell, 19, and yet you stayed in uniform because of Detective Kane's protection. But that protection ends today. Caldwell's hands trembled. Kane won't let this happen. Kane, Marcus said quietly, is already under federal surveillance. We know about the cash drops, the falsified reports, the evidence tampering. You were his insurance policy, his distraction. That's not true, Caldwell muttered, though even he didn't sound convinced. It is, Marcus replied. He's been using you to shield his own operation, every time you blew up, every time a citizen complained about your conduct. It shifted attention away from him. Caldwell's knees weakened, realization dawning. He wasn't just corrupt, he was expendable. The camera zoomed in as his gun hand trembled. Vargas signaled an agent to disarm him discreetly. Take his weapon, she ordered. Benson stepped back, shaken. Director, I didn't know. I believe you, Officer Benson, Vargas said. But now you do, and you'll decide what kind of officer you want to be. The sound of cameras clicking filled the air as news crews surrounded the scene. Caldwell, pale and trembling, muttered under his breath. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Marcus looked at him, calm but unrelenting. That's the problem. Officer, it always goes this far when no one stops it. Vargas turned toward her agents. Uncuff him. As the metal restraints fell away, Marcus rubbed his wrists, the faint red marks glistening under the sunlight. For a moment. The entire street was silent. No shouting, no murmuring, just the sound of justice arriving right on time. Behind the camera, Sophia whispered through tears. He planned this. He knew this would happen. And she was right. Marcus had orchestrated everything, the timing, the location, even the live stream that exposed the truth. Because sometimes, the only way to reform a system built on silence is to make the whole world listen. Director Elena Vargas stood at the center of Oakwood Lane, her quiet authority cutting through the chaos like a blade through fog. She didn't shout, didn't wave her hands, yet her voice carried enough power to silence an entire neighborhood. Let it be clearly understood, she said, her tone precise and unwavering. This man, Marcus Reynolds, is not a suspect, not a trespasser, but the Assistant Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Civil Rights Division. Her words fell heavy, echoing through the cul-de-sac where, moments earlier, arrogance had filled the air. The officers who once towered over Marcus now stood frozen, their confidence draining away with every syllable. Reporters, neighbors, and onlookers shifted uneasily, realizing they had just witnessed an act of racial profiling unfold against a man whose job was to stop it. Sophia Ramirez, her phone trembling in her hand, continued filming. Her voice cracked slightly, but she refused to stop. They arrested a federal agent, she whispered to her audience. On his own driveway. This is real. Vargas turned to Marcus. Are you all right? He nodded once, straightening his cuffs with quiet dignity. Better now. Director, everything happened as expected. Her expression softened for a moment, the stern leader giving way to a mentor who deeply respected the man before her. You've done well, she said, and not just for yourself. For every person who's ever been silenced by that badge. Marcus glanced toward Zoe's window, where his daughter's small face was still pressed against the glass. He smiled faintly, reassuring her without words. Then he turned back to Caldwell, who looked like a man unraveling from the inside. Officer Caldwell, Vargas began, her tone once again all business. Your actions this morning will be documented, reviewed, and submitted as evidence under Federal Code 18 U.S.C. 242, deprivation of rights under color of law. You've been given every chance to serve honorably, yet you chose bias over duty. Caldwell's throat tightened. I didn't know who he was, he said weakly. That's the point. Vargas replied, You shouldn't have to know a man's title to treat him with dignity. She let the silence linger, the truth of her words cutting deeper than any reprimand. Officer Benson stood beside Caldwell, visibly shaken. Ma'am, she said softly, we didn't mean for this to go that far. Vargas's gaze moved to her, calm but firm. Officer Benson, when a man tells you this is his home, and you still assume he's lying because of the color of his skin, that's not misunderstanding. That's participation. Benson's eyes dropped. Torres, older and wiser, nodded slowly. She's right, he admitted. We saw it happening, and we didn't stop it. Vargas exhaled quietly. Then start now. The only way to restore public trust is to confront what's broken inside your own ranks. The scene was no longer chaos. It was revelation. Every word was being recorded, not as gossip, but as evidence of truth. The news crews moved closer. Dana Nguyen from Channel 9 raised her microphone. Director Vargas, she asked respectfully, can you confirm that this incident is part of a larger federal operation? Vargas looked directly into the camera. Yes, she said. For the past 2 years, the FBI's Civil Rights Division has conducted an investigation into more than 50 police departments nationwide. The program is called Operation Reflection. It examines systemic bias, false arrests, and corruption under the guise of law enforcement. Willow Ridge was one of the key focus areas due to an unusually high rate of racial complaints. The crowd gasped. The revelation hit like a shockwave. Marcus spoke next, his voice steady, carrying the weight of a man who'd spent a lifetime choosing patience over rage. This community isn't unique, he said. It's a reflection of what happens when silence becomes comfort. When people believe that wealth or reputation can hide prejudice, they build walls instead of trust. Caldwell shook his head in disbelief. You set me up. Marcus looked at him calmly. No, officer. You set yourself up the day you decided someone like me didn't belong here. Vargas gestured toward the parked SUVs. You're being relieved of duty pending investigation, effective immediately. 2 federal agents stepped forward. Caldwell backed away instinctively, then stopped. His voice broke as he muttered, I was just following orders. Marcus tilted his head slightly. That's what every man says before he realizes those orders came from corruption. The agents led Caldwell aside. Vargas turned her attention to the rest of the department personnel on scene. This isn't about one man. It's about a pattern, one that will now be corrected. She then faced Susan Whitaker, the HOA coordinator who had started the chain reaction. Susan stood pale and speechless, clutching her clipboard like a shield. Mrs. Whitaker, Vargas said, you called in a report claiming a suspicious person near a property you knew belonged to Marcus Reynolds. I was just protecting the neighborhood, Susan stammered. From what? Vargas asked sharply. From your own bias? Or from the illusion that this neighborhood belongs only to people who look like you? Susan's mouth opened, but no words came out. Vargas continued. You're going to receive a federal inquiry notice for aiding and abetting false reporting under discriminatory pretense. The crowd murmured. Even some of the neighbors who had stood silently began to shift uncomfortably. Realizing their own complicity, Marcus looked around at the faces, some ashamed, others defensive, and said quietly, I've spent 25 years fighting this same battle in cities across the country. But it's different when it happens in front of your own child. When the very thing you protect others from finds its way to your doorstep. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Every pause, every word carried the weight of generations. Vargas placed a hand briefly on his shoulder, both reassurance and respect. We'll take it from here, Marcus, but I want you to know, your courage today just accelerated change for millions. He nodded. That's all I wanted. Behind them, agents began documenting the scene, taking photos, collecting footage, securing statements. The Rolls-Royce gleamed under the sun, a silent witness to the morning's ordeal. Zoe came running out from the house, unable to stay hidden any longer. She threw her arms around her father's waist. Marcus knelt, embracing her tightly. It's okay, sweetheart, he whispered. They know now. Vargas smiled gently at the sight. That's what justice should look like, she said softly. Not revenge, recognition. The moment felt larger than the street, larger than the city. It was the turning point where fear gave way to accountability. And as the cameras rolled, Marcus Reynolds stood tall beside his daughter, the man who'd just exposed the truth, not through anger or power, but through calm, undeniable truth. Justice, for once, had arrived in daylight. Chief Harlan Brooks arrived 20 minutes later, his polished badge gleaming but his expression grim. He had been chief for 30 years, the kind of man who prided himself on keeping the department quiet, even if that meant burying the truth beneath paperwork. As he stepped out of his car, he was met not with salutes, but silence. Cameras followed his every move. Reporters were already narrating the scene, describing how an FBI assistant director had been handcuffed by one of his own subjects in an active federal investigation. Marcus stood calmly beside Director Vargas, his hands free now, his posture steady. Brooks forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Director Vargas, he said carefully, this looks like a misunderstanding. Vargas crossed her arms. A misunderstanding doesn't involve racial slurs, false detainment, and an armed threat against a federal officer on his own property. Brooks's face tightened. My department had no knowledge of Agent Reynolds' assignment. We were acting on a civilian report. Marcus's calm voice cut through his excuse. That report came from Susan Whitaker, who has a documented history of discriminatory calls. You ignored it because it served your purpose, to keep this community filtered. Brooks's smile vanished. Filtered? That's a strong accusation. Agent Reynolds. It's not an accusation, Marcus replied. It's a pattern. Vargas gestured toward a nearby agent, who opened a folder thick with documents. Chief Brooks, as part of Operation Reflection, we've been reviewing internal communications between your department and Detective Harlan Kane. We found evidence of falsified reports, missing narcotics from evidence lockers, and money transfers to offshore accounts. You want to explain that? Brooks froze. That's absurd. Kane's a decorated officer. He's also under federal arrest, Vargas said calmly. We picked him up an hour ago. He confessed to coordinating cover-ups for drug shipments moving through your jurisdiction. And he named you, Chief. The color drained from Brooks's face. Caldwell, standing in the background with 2 federal agents beside him, looked up in shock. He used me, Caldwell muttered. Marcus turned toward him, his expression neither cruel nor sympathetic. You let him. Caldwell's head dropped. For the first time, the man who had started the chaos looked broken, stripped of his arrogance. I didn't know what he was into, he said softly. He told me to keep things quiet, to keep certain people out, said it would make the neighborhood safer. Safer for who? Marcus asked quietly. People who looked like you? Caldwell had no answer. Vargas turned back to Brooks. Chief, you hid federal correspondence warning you that your department was under review. You signed false audits to protect Kane. You even diverted training funds meant for bias education. That's obstruction. Brooks swallowed hard. You're ruining good officers with paperwork and politics. No, Marcus said firmly, stepping forward. You ruined them by teaching fear instead of fairness. The crowd murmured in agreement. A few neighbors who had once whispered against Marcus now nodded silently. The truth had shifted the atmosphere. The tension that had begun as racial suspicion was transforming into collective reckoning. Vargas looked to her agents. Chief Brooks, you're relieved of duty pending federal indictment. The old man's shoulders slumped. You can't do this, he muttered. Actually, Vargas replied, I can, and I just did. Reporters leaned in as Brooks was escorted away. Cameras captured the sight. The chief of Willow Ridge Police, handcuffed and placed in the very patrol car once used to humiliate Marcus. The symbolism was too powerful to ignore. Dana Nguyen's voice came through live on television. In a remarkable turn of events, Chief Harlan Brooks has just been detained by federal agents. The Willow Ridge Police Department is now officially under federal supervision. Marcus exhaled quietly, not in triumph, but in relief. It's over, Aisha whispered beside him, having arrived minutes earlier. No, Marcus said softly. It's beginning. Vargas turned to him. What do you want done next? Marcus didn't hesitate. The department signs a consent decree, mandatory federal oversight, reform audits, and full transparency to the community. Vargas nodded approvingly. Already in motion. She signaled to Agent Maria Lopez, who approached with a document. Chief Brooks's replacement will sign it today. No department this compromised should operate without watch. Caldwell, still standing to the side, spoke again, his voice trembling. Agent Reynolds, I need to say something. Marcus turned slowly. Go ahead. I was wrong, Caldwell said, his tone hollow but sincere. About everything. I saw people like you as a threat because that's how I was trained to see the world. Kane fed that poison. I let it grow. And what will you do about it? Marcus asked. Caldwell hesitated. Whatever it takes. Even if that means facing what I've done. Vargas glanced between them. You'll have your chance. Officer Caldwell, under 18 U.S. C. 242. You're facing 12 years in federal court, but cooperation and rehabilitation can change the outcome. Caldwell nodded, tears welling in his eyes. I'll cooperate. I'll tell you everything. Marcus's gaze softened slightly. Then start by telling the truth. To yourself. Behind them. The news crews continued filming as agents rolled in evidence boxes, laptops, and confiscated documents. The once pristine street now looked like a live investigation zone. Sophia Ramirez, who had filmed everything from the start, lowered her phone for the first time. Her hands trembled. You did it, she whispered to Marcus. No, he said quietly. We did it. Every person who refused to look away did it. Vargas stepped beside him, her tone shifting to something almost proud. This footage will become a landmark in civil rights enforcement. You exposed not just individuals, but a system. Marcus nodded. And now, we fix it. As the sun began to dip behind the roofs, the light softened across the street. Neighbors who once hid behind curtains came out, some to apologize, others to simply see justice happen in real time. A small crowd gathered near Marcus's driveway as Vargas addressed them. "Change doesn't come from silence," she said. "It comes from the courage to face what's wrong, even when it's uncomfortable. What happened today will lead to reform, not just here, but across this country." The crowd applauded softly, hesitant at first, then stronger. Marcus stood quietly beside Zoe, who clung to his hand. She looked up at him and asked in a small voice, "Daddy, are they going to be good now?" He smiled faintly. "They will try, sweetheart, and that's where it starts." Caldwell, now seated in the back of a federal vehicle, pressed his head against the window. He watched Marcus and his daughter, a mix of shame and gratitude flickering in his eyes. For the first time, he saw not a suspect, but a man he wished he had been. The reporters wrapped up their coverage. The crowd began to disperse. Vargas placed a final note in her report before looking at Marcus one last time. "You've done more for this town in 2 hours than most do in a lifetime," she said. Marcus looked around, at the neighbors, the officers, the reporters, and finally, at his family. "Justice isn't loud," he said softly. "It's steady. It arrives when people decide they've had enough." And as the final patrol car carrying Chief Brooks rolled away, the people of Willow Ridge finally understood. This wasn't just a scandal. It was a reckoning. The weeks that followed felt like a long, sobering exhale for Willow Ridge. The glossy image of the neighborhood, the trimmed hedges, the silent gates, the perfect lawns, had cracked beyond repair. For the first time, people were talking, not in hushed tones behind closed doors, but in community halls, church basements, and front yards that had once been divided by invisible lines of fear. Operation Reflection had shifted from a quiet investigation to a national reckoning, and Marcus Reynolds was at the heart of it. Officer Ryan Caldwell, now suspended pending federal sentencing, sat alone in his small apartment downtown, watching the footage that had gone viral across the country. The man he had handcuffed, the man he had mocked, was now being interviewed on national television beside director Elena Vargas. Marcus didn't gloat, didn't attack. He simply spoke the truth with grace and weight. "Justice," he said, "isn't about revenge. It's about reflection." Those words stayed in Caldwell's mind like a sermon he couldn't forget. His lawyer called to tell him the plea deal had been finalized. He wouldn't serve prison time. Instead, under federal oversight, he'd receive 5 years probation, 300 hours of mandatory community service in underserved neighborhoods, and complete a 2-year rehabilitation and bias re-education program for a man who had nearly drawn his weapon on an unarmed black father. It was a merciful sentence, but one that carried a heavy expectation of change the night after the ruling. Caldwell sat in his kitchen with an unopened bottle of whiskey in front of him. He'd been sober for 9 months, and the temptation whispered like an old friend. But instead of drinking, he picked up a pen. He began writing. It wasn't a report or a confession. It was a letter. To Assistant Director Reynolds, he wrote, "You don't owe me forgiveness, and I don't deserve it. But I need you to know that what you did that day broke me, in the way I needed to be broken. I've spent my life seeing power as control. You showed me that real power is restraint." He signed it simply. Ryan Caldwell. The letter was never sent, but it marked the beginning of something different inside him. Meanwhile, the federal reforms Marcus and Vargas pushed forward began taking root. The Willow Ridge Police Department was placed under a 3-year consent decree. Overseen by the Department of Justice, every officer was required to complete 50 hours of annual bias and civil rights training, monitored through AI-assisted body cameras that flagged discriminatory behavior for review. Community members, including Sofia Ramirez, were invited to serve on a new civilian oversight board, an unprecedented move in the town's history for the first time. Accountability was no longer optional. Susan Whitaker, the HOA coordinator whose phone call had sparked the chain of events, faced her own reckoning. The civil suit against her was settled for $500,000, most of which went toward a new community program promoting diversity education in Willow Ridge. She lost her position, her reputation, and eventually her home, relocating quietly to another county. No one cheered at her downfall. Instead, people reflected on how easily fear had disguised itself as standards. Detective Harlan Kane's story ended differently. His corruption case unraveled into a web of extortion and narcotics trafficking. He took a plea deal, accepting an 8-year federal sentence. His betrayal of the department became a cautionary tale nationwide, a living example of how unchecked authority can rot even the institutions meant to protect. Chief Brooks, disgraced and stripped of his pension, retired under public shame, his 30-year legacy reduced to a footnote of failure. Through it all, Marcus never once spoke with vengeance. His public appearances remained calm, almost pastoral in tone. Accountability, he told a CNN interviewer, isn't a weapon, it's a mirror, if we're brave enough to look into it. We'll find both our mistakes and our redemption. His words resonated deeply, and communities across the country began demanding similar reforms. In Willow Ridge, healing didn't happen overnight, but it happened. Aisha Reynolds led a series of town workshops called Conversations Over Coffee, inviting residents to sit face-to-face and share how bias had touched their lives. People came hesitantly at first, but by the third session, the room was full. A retired teacher admitted she once crossed the street when she saw black teenagers walking by. A young Latino mechanic confessed he never trusted police because of how his father had been treated. The conversations weren't easy, but they were real. And that's where transformation began. Sofia Ramirez, the neighbor whose live stream had exposed the truth, became a local hero. The footage she captured was later presented at a federal conference on police reform. She received letters from across the country, teachers, pastors, and parents thanking her for her courage. "You didn't just film injustice," one wrote. "You filmed change being born." Marcus met with her privately one afternoon at the newly formed Willow Ridge Community Center, now funded by redirected police resources. "You did something powerful. Sophia," he said. "You didn't just record what happened. You made the country pay attention." She smiled humbly. "I just pressed record," she said softly. "You're the one who stayed calm." Marcus shook his head. "Calm isn't weakness. It's the discipline of someone who knows when the storm's about to end." Across town, Caldwell began his community service quietly, without cameras or attention. He worked at youth outreach centers, teaching self-defense and de-escalation. He didn't wear his uniform. He didn't want recognition. One afternoon, while cleaning the basketball court after a session, a young boy asked, "Weren't you that cop from the video?" Caldwell froze. "Yeah," he said slowly. "That was me." The boy shrugged. "You look different now." Caldwell smiled faintly. "I'm trying to be." Word spread, and slowly. Residents began to see that maybe people could change, if they were forced to face the truth and do the work. Marcus continued his work in Washington, helping expand Operation Reflection into a permanent federal initiative. But he and Aisha made sure to keep returning to Willow Ridge. They attended community events, met with officers, and sat in classrooms to speak with students about integrity and courage. Even Zoe, now 11, began helping her mother organize youth activities at the new center. Her innocence had been wounded that day, but not destroyed. Instead, it had transformed into purpose. Late one evening, as Marcus stood outside his house, he looked across Oakwood Lane. The once watchful neighbors now waved, greeted him by name, even brought over coffee on weekends. It didn't erase the past, but it proved that growth was possible. He thought about his father, the man who died at the hands of police decades ago, and whispered quietly, "We're finally getting there. Dad." The wind carried his words softly through the trees. In the months that followed, the FBI released a national report showing bias-related incidents had dropped significantly in departments under reform. Willow Ridge, once known for division, had become a model of recovery. Even Caldwell was featured in a local article titled "The Cost of Change," speaking openly about humility, addiction, and redemption. "It doesn't erase what I did," he said in the interview, "but it proves that people can learn. I owe that lesson to Marcus Reynolds." Marcus read the article with quiet satisfaction. The journey had been painful, but necessary. Justice wasn't a single event. It was a process, one that required courage, patience, and grace. As night settled over Oakwood Lane, the same driveway that had once been a crime scene now glowed softly under the porch lights. Inside, the laughter of his family filled the air. For the first time in a long time, Marcus felt peace, not because the world was fixed, but because it was finally learning how to heal. 6 months later, Oakwood Lane no longer felt like the same street. The fear that once lingered in the quiet corners of Willow Ridge had been replaced by something new: conversation, progress, and a sense of cautious hope. Where the flashing lights of patrol cars once marked humiliation, now stood an elegant new building with a silver plaque that read Federal Bureau of Investigation, Willow Ridge Field Office. The decision to open it here was deliberate, symbolic. Justice had returned to the very ground where injustice once stood. On a bright Saturday morning, Marcus Reynolds stood before a small crowd gathered for the ribbon-cutting ceremony, dressed in a navy suit with his daughter Zoe holding his hand. He looked proud, calm, and reflective. Director Elena Vargas stood beside him, smiling softly. "Today," she said into the microphone, "we open not just a building, but a promise. That accountability will never again be optional." The crowd applauded, the sound carrying through the tree-lined neighborhood. Sofia Ramirez stood near the front, recording the moment with tears in her eyes. Her live stream from 6 months earlier had reached 15 million views nationwide. It sparked the national campaign Document Injustice, which encouraged citizens to record and report racial incidents responsibly. Her courage had changed laws, inspired movements, and reminded people that truth, once seen, cannot be unseen. Marcus took the microphone next. 6 months ago, I was standing in this very driveway, with my hands cuffed behind my back, he began, his voice steady, deliberate. I was told I didn't belong in the neighborhood I helped protect, in the country I've served for 25 years. But that day didn't destroy me. It reminded me why I started this work, because dignity should never depend on perception. It's a right, not a privilege. His words hung in the air with quiet power. Aisha smiled from the front row, Zoe leaning against her shoulder, her eyes bright with admiration. Marcus continued. Since that morning, we've seen change. Willow Ridge Police Department now reports an 82% drop in bias-related incidents. Community trust is up by 68%, and across the country, cities are following suit, training officers, revising policies, and rebuilding bridges that were once burned. The crowd broke into applause again, but Marcus lifted his hand slightly for silence. But none of this happens because of titles or badges, he said softly. It happens because ordinary people, neighbors, parents, children, choose to do what's right, even when it's not easy. He turned toward Sophia. That day, a woman across the street refused to look away. Because of her, the world saw the truth, and because of that truth, the law is changing. Sophia smiled through her tears, nodding. It wasn't pride she felt. It was peace. The kind that comes when doing the right thing changes lives. Vargas stepped up once more, holding up a copy of Marcus's new book, Calm in the Storm. This, she said, will now be mandatory reading for all FBI trainees and police academy cadets nationwide. It teaches what every badge should represent. Courage guided by conscience. The crowd cheered. Cameras flashed. For a brief moment, Marcus closed his eyes and let the sound wash over him. He thought of his father, of that night in 1998 when everything had changed. He whispered silently, "We did it. Dad, we finally turned pain into purpose." After the ceremony, people mingled under the morning sun. Officers shook hands with residents, not as enforcers, but as equals. A local choir sang softly in the background, their voices weaving through the laughter and conversation. Caldwell stood near the edge of the crowd, wearing a plain gray suit. His posture was humble, his expression sincere. He waited until most people had left before approaching Marcus. "I read your book," he said quietly, "and I finished my bias training last week. It was eye-opening." Marcus studied him for a long moment, then offered a hand. "Good," he said simply. Caldwell shook it firmly. "I'm coaching youth now, in the same community I used to patrol. They ask me why I changed. I tell them about you." Marcus nodded. "Then make sure they learn something I didn't have when I was your age. Patience." Caldwell smiled faintly. "I'm trying, sir," as he walked away. Marcus felt no anger, no lingering resentment, only understanding. Redemption, he realized, wasn't about erasing the past. It was about choosing a different future. Later that afternoon, Marcus sat on the front steps of his home, watching Zoe play with neighborhood kids, children of all colors and backgrounds. Their laughter was the purest sound he'd ever heard. Aisha joined him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "It's peaceful again," she said softly. "Yes," Marcus replied. "But this time, it's the kind of peace we earned." From across the street, Sophia waved goodbye as she loaded her camera into her car. She had a new assignment now, a documentary series about reform called Through Their Eyes. She smiled as Marcus waved back. In Washington, the Federal Police Accountability Act had just passed Congress. Inspired directly by Operation Reflection, it introduced stricter federal standards for misconduct, real-time oversight systems, and protection for civilian whistleblowers. Marcus had testified before the Senate the week prior, speaking not as a victim, but as a reformer. When the bill passed, even his political opponents applauded. As evening settled, Marcus stood by his Rolls-Royce, the same car that had once mirrored his humiliation. Now, its reflection showed something different. A man who had turned injustice into a legacy. He looked up at the sky, golden in the sunset, and whispered a final thought meant for anyone still listening. "Power without empathy is empty," he said, "but empathy, when guided by truth, can rebuild the world." In the distance, church bells chimed softly, and the sound carried through Willow Ridge, a community once broken, now reborn. Thank you so much for watching this story. If it moved you, don't just scroll away. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more real stories about justice, humanity, and hope.